All right, well, we're in the shop today, and today we're going to be working on my LS Miata. If you've been around a while, you know this car. This car has been here from the start. It has undergone a lot of changes. It has put in a lot of work. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Roka for sponsoring today's video and making this project, this refresh of the Miata, possible. It's won a lot of competitions. It's held its own against some crazy cars. And it's been semi-retired for a little bit. We built the C6 Corvette competition drift build, which is covered by boxes at the moment. We got this car done. This is the new comp car. So this thing's kind of fallen by the wayside. It has been broken since round 3 of Clutch Kickers last year. We didn't break the diff, but we tweaked the diff, slamming it into the ground, ripped the axle out of the socket, broke the axle. So we've got some repairs to do to get this thing back on the road. And I've been stockpiling some upgrades for this thing over the last year or so, just stuff that I've wanted to do to it for a long time. And I want to get all that stuff knocked out as well, get this thing a bit of a refresh and get it back in tip-top shape. Been a workhorse for a while, hasn't really had much downtime, so now's the time to do it. All right, guys, before we get too deep into today's video, I wanted to talk to you about today's video sponsor, Roka. So Roka is a performance eyewear company. It's meant to go where you go, do what you do, working in the shop, going to the track, stuffing them in my helmet, while I'm drifting, but in modern, everyday, stylish frames, which is huge for me. I like what I like when it comes to glasses. I'm not willing to give that up, but I'm usually sacrificing the performance. Whereas with these, I get to have my cake and I get to eat it too. So I've probably had 50 plus pairs of glasses over the years. And when I took these out of the box, I was absolutely blown away by the quality and the craftsmanship. So you'd look at these frames and you would think that's a heavy frame, right? Part of the sacrifice of the style, heavy frame. Nope. Literally weigh like what a pencil weighs. With prescription lenses, these things weigh absolutely nothing. Not only that, but they've got these gecko rubber pads here and here on the nose, and these prevent your glasses from slipping down your face, which is a huge problem for me. It is like the most annoying thing ever when you're working on a car, and as soon as you look down, they slide down, or I've had them fall off into buckets of oil, it's a nightmare. It's really annoying to deal with, and I've dealt with it the entire time I've worn glasses. You guys know, you give me a lot of grief all the time for constantly pushing my glasses up on my face, and I know it's annoying, but I didn't think there was any solution. I tried just about everything, but these don't slip, not at all. Not to mention, they're designed to have minimal pressure points, and between that and the weight and the pads, I can wear these literally all day long and I forget they're there. I forget they're on my face. And I can't tell you how good that feels after wearing glasses for as long as I have, to have glasses that just fit and are comfortable and are light and they don't bug you by the end of the day. It's a really nice feeling. I'm telling you, I couldn't ever go back. I'm really blown away by these. I'm really impressed with them. So that being said, we do have a lot of work to do, but I want to extend a huge thank you to Roka for sponsoring this video. If you're interested in trying them out for yourself, either go to the link down in the description or go to roka.com/Taylor Ray with 2 R's to get 20% off your first order. I'm telling you, if you're a glasses wearer, it's definitely worth trying out. If you're like me, you're never gonna go back. So anyway, that being said, I said we get back to work, let's get to it. So the first thing we decided to tear into was not the rear end, which is the main reason for doing these projects, but the front end. So we're gonna be upgrading and replacing the entire cooling system, so we need to take the old cooling system back out. Now, this is one of the few areas of the car that has remained pretty much unchanged in the 5 or 6 years I've been running it. I went from regular fans to I built a shroud and put some Mishimoto race fans on, and that's about all I've changed in that department in the entire time this car has been together. There was like a dip right before the ramp, and I just went to ramp it in there like no cares and dropped into the dip right before the tires went up the ramp, so the bottom radiator sport just you can see the crank pulley.
Oh my god.
Just a Miata.
Let me roll. That's weird. There we go.
Right? So you're saying we should change the spark plugs?
I don't know. I'm just saying.
I know. Shit, I forgot all about that. But
I figured I just mentioned it.
It definitely needs new plugs.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like.
The question is, we could probably just put non-nitrous plugs back in it.
Either non-nitrous plugs or also the fact that we haven't taken them out since we put nitrous in it. I'm not trying to, wait on you.
Either way, we need to put plugs in it.
I know it's not really going to go down.
Because remember, it was breaking up that last round. I forgot all about that. Display rained on my parade. We were just doing upgrades, but we got to try to take our spark plugs out for the first time since they didn't come out the last time, and we had to stay up till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night retapping the holes. Post your guesses below on if they're going to come out or not. Still merit. All right, well, we got the front of this thing completely torn apart. This is a batch of upgrades that I've wanted to do for a long time to this thing. You can see how crusty it is in here. This has not come apart in years. So I'm pretty excited about this. So what we've got is an electric water pump that goes in the stock location. Now, this is something I've thought about for a long time, but when I got the vet build as an unfinished project, we ended up redoing everything. And one of the things we didn't end up using that came with it was this electric water pump. We have one mounted back on the radiator. So I've had this sitting around and I decided it's finally time to toss it on. Now, the reason I think this is going to be a big upgrade for us is this car makes way more power, thus it generates way more heat. It's got a turbo setup and all these things, and it runs super cool and cools down very quickly because the electric water pump is always flowing the same amount of volume. So at idle, it's flowing the same volume as it is at redline, whereas when you have a mechanical pump like this, it's gonna flow more as the engine revs up. So that's really good when you're at high RPM driving the car, but that means it doesn't flow a lot of volume at idle. And drift cars do most of their cooling at idle. When you're sitting in grid waiting for the next run, the run's only 30, 40, 50 seconds, and then you're just sitting there idling. So if you have a cooling system that will cool very quickly at idle, that's the most important thing. So that is why I want to do an electric water pump. It should be an upgrade. So we've also got some new race fans, but I gotta go dig around in the container because these are the wrong size. But mine has been trashed forever, ever since I slammed the radiator into the crank pulley. So it still works, but I'd like to replace it. We've also got a brand new radiator from LS Miata. My old one here has been in the car from the very beginning. Oh, don't spill everywhere. And it has seen some better days. You can see the fins are all beat up. It's full of dirt. This thing's been in need of some replacement. And we're gonna need to do AN lines with this new water pump, so we're starting with a fresh radiator to weld our AN fittings onto. We've got the old lines that came with the vet as well since we redid all those, so we're gonna repurpose these. We've got most of the stuff to do it, so might as well do it. Now, the next thing we're gonna tackle before we dive into this part of things, while we got everything apart, is pulling these spark plugs out. So we changed the plugs when we put the nitrous on. They hadn't been changed in a long time, because I'm bad at maintenance sometimes with the car because it just works. And they were pretty corroded and they tore up the threads coming out. We had to extract one of them that broke off in the head. It was a nightmare at 10 o'clock before a drift event. And we haven't changed them since. And with nitrous, we're supposed to change plugs frequently. Be honest, I thought I was gonna do it a long time ago, but I've been putting it off. So we're gonna try to pull these plugs out and see what happens. So cross your fingers, hopefully we can get them out. What do you think? What's your guesses, Josue?
I think it's gonna be good.
I have a good feeling that they're gonna come out because they haven't been in that long.
They're gonna be good.
All right, let's see if we can get these plugs out of this thing. So we started working on taking the plugs out of this thing. Definitely a bit nerve-wracking. If this goes any more wrong than it did the last time we did this, we're gonna have to pull the cylinder heads off, which I would like to avoid at the moment. Needs to be done at some point in the future. This engine has seen a lot of abuse and a lot of years of driving and rev limiter and now nitrous, so it's gonna have to happen, but I prefer for it not to happen today. I just wanna get these plugs changed. So fortunately, they all came out without any catastrophes. The heads don't have to come off today, but while we've got the plugs out, we might as well go ahead and do a quick compression test. We haven't health checked this engine in probably a couple years. It's been a while. The car's a trooper. It always works. It's never given us a reason to, but while we've got the plugs out, while we've got the room and the access, we might as well make sure that, confirm my suspicions that she's still good. She's still knit. Oh no. Oof. Oof.
Quite slow too.
Oof.
It's not the loud.
Right? Let's try again. Ready? Yep. Yeah, I could kind of see it. 30. Oof. That's what I get for saying I think it's gonna be fine. I can't tell the exact numbers, but I was like, oh, it's about right. It went up pretty quick.
Try it again.
No, I think that is what it is. All right, now I'm like 148. I guess we'll need to do a leak down next. So as much as the bad news kind of sucks, one way or another, we need to figure out exactly what's wrong or what went wrong so that we can prevent it from happening in the future. And just to satisfy my own curiosity, I'm not okay with just letting things be and not knowing what happened. But in this scenario, it's going to be kind of hard to tell without tearing the engine down. So we first went in with the inspection camera. The pistons looked fine. The cylinder walls looked fine. I didn't see any broken ringlands. And then we got in there with the leak down tester. So we're basically just shoving air into the cylinder to basically mimic what the compression would be like if the engine was running and see where that leaks down from. Where is the air coming out of? I don't do leak down tests because like every engine is gonna leak past the rings. This one was definitely coming chooching out of here. This one was not so much, but we're on that bank. So I guess we would need to have taken this cap off. I think it's safe to say it's rings on both. Never got anything out of the cooling system. It would at least spit something out, you know? So we just keep running it, hope for the best. All right, well, I 100% would have put money on the fact that this engine was perfectly healthy. A, based on the way it runs. B, based on the fact that it is pretty hard to hurt a naturally aspirated LS. We have been very hard on this thing. We've had clogged injectors that leaned out cylinders. We've sprayed it with 100 shot of nitrous without dyno tuning it or even data logging it because I, definitely should have done those things, but I didn't. And every time it's been completely fine. And I had no reason to believe it wasn't fine. We just had the plugs out and decided to compression test it for the first time in a couple of years. And cylinder number 7 and cylinder number 2 were pretty low. They were both in the 130, 140 range, whereas the rest were in the 200 to 220 range, which is what it was the last time we compression tested it. Regardless, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't change my approach. Like this thing's staying in the car until it doesn't run anymore, and then we'll pull it out and fix it. But it runs fine, and for what we're doing with the car nowadays, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't need to be peak performance. If this was coming into the comp season, it would matter more, but I really want this year for Josue to drive it and for Raldo to drive it and stuff, and then get them to where we can tandem with me and the vet. So it's a-okay. So yeah, anyway, we've got all that torn apart. We're good there. We need to move to the diff, start getting that taken apart so we can rebuild everything back there and get this thing fixed. Fix the thing we were actually planning to fix originally when we started all this. Rabbit hole. Escalated quickly, as Josue said. Things definitely escalated quickly. All right, we're gonna get back to work. So the last round that this car competed at was round 3 of Clutch Kickers last year, and we were battling Ben Hobson. We had a really good close battle. It was this banked layout. I was so happy with how the car was doing. We got a one more time, and in that one more time, I went a little deep in the last turn and dirt dropped, and a lot of people had been doing that on this layout, so it was really rutted out on the edge of the track, which was also very jagged. So when I dropped my tire into that rut, I basically just slammed my diff into the ground sideways and caught one of those jagged edges, which then caused everything to bend and give. Now, part of that is my lack of maintenance with this car. We would always take it last minute thinking the vet was going to be done, and the front bushing on the passenger side had been gone for a while, and it basically splits apart, and I never replaced it because I always thought about it last minute. So all of that load was going to the rear of the diff and caused it to bend the mount. I mean, that was the only thing keeping the diff from twisting when it hit the ground. Now, unfortunately, it bent the subframe too. I was really hoping that we would be able to get away with just pulling the diff out of this thing, but not the case. And it's something I've learned with this car is that you break one thing, you usually break a lot more things than you can see at first glance. So that means we've got to pull the subframe out. Now, fortunately, me and Josue are both very, very familiar with this process. I've done it probably a dozen times now. He's been there for probably half of them, so it's really a piece of cake for us to pull this subframe out. It's one of the easier things to work on the car, and it's a good excuse to get it cleaned up. When you break axles like we did, the axle grease tends to go everywhere and get all over everything. So this gives us a good opportunity to degrease this thing and pressure wash it off. So we've got a clean subframe to work with until it gets dirty again, probably very quickly. So with that out of the way, we wanted to go ahead and test fit the electric water pump and make sure it was going to work before we started modifying the radiator and got past that point of no return. All right, subframe's out and cleaned up. I debated doing it in the car or not, but it's going to be a lot easier to do it properly, get it repaired right with it on the bench. So got that thing done. The car is pretty much fully torn down. We went ahead and put the electric water pump on to test fit it, and overall it fits, but the snout is a lot longer than what we had on here before, and we've kind of got two problems that we can kind of fix with one solution. So let me show you. So I've been planning to replace this fan for years now. I can pull it away and it won't hit, but it always works its way back into the crank pulley. So the problem is these are 11-inch fans, these are 10-inch fans, and these are 12-inch fans. So I thought I had fans that would fit, replacements, but I don't. They're both the wrong size. So what I've decided I'm gonna try to do is steal the fan setup off of this car. So I've wanted to upgrade this for a while. This was kind of one of those, we ran out of time and we had to pick and choose our battles, so we just used them for the meantime, hence why we got aluminum foil tape and stuff. This is not a permanent thing for me. So I wanted to build a shroud for this car and put some better fans on it for a while. Now's the perfect opportunity. So we're gonna steal this setup for the Miata and build a shroud to use these larger, deeper, more aggressive Mishimoto race fans on this car. So that fixes our broken fan problem, but also should give us more clearance to the snout here, which I think we're gonna need, and more clearance to the crank pulley, so if it does shift around, it doesn't run into the crank pulley. So two birds, one stone, as they say. So upgrading the fan setup on the Vet here was supposed to be an off-season project anyway. It's just one of those things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It worked fine, so it was hard to give myself the motivation to pull these off and build a whole custom shroud and do all that. But now that we kind of need them for the Miata, I mean, you know, it's a win-win. So I pulled them off the Vet, test fitted them on the radiator. It's a little bit big, but I think it's gonna work out fine. So I used the old radiator to test fit the shroud and make sure it was all gonna fit before we got into the work of mounting it to the new radiator. And then it was time to finally dive into a fab project. I feel like I haven't done a fab project in ages. They're my favorite type of projects to do. And this is a pretty simple one. We're basically using the mounts that allowed the shroud to bolt on to the Vet's radiator, and we're gonna weld them to this radiator, and that's gonna give us threaded holes to bolt the fan shroud into. So it's pretty simple, it's pretty just janky and quick, but it's still a fab project, still makes me happy. So I'm excited about this. Again, it's been a while. So we went ahead and tacked the mounts on, and then we're gonna pull everything back off before we weld these. Welding aluminum, it gets hot, and if you've got plastic touching it or you've got cardboard touching it, it's gonna melt, it's gonna set on fire. So you gotta pull everything back off and then weld it, and then you can put everything back on and make sure it still fits. So we did that. We went ahead and put the shroud back on, made sure it fit, and then got an idea of where we can weld on this dash 16 fitting for this upper hose. It's gonna be really tight with that shroud, and I wanted to make sure I didn't weld it on in a place where I then can't get a fitting on it. It's basically all of fab work is tack, test fit, tack, test fit. It's just a lot of back and forth. So with that done, I went ahead and welded out the dash 16 upper. Now, I would have liked to have used a dash 16 on the lower too, just to keep the hoses kind of small. I use dash 16 upper and lower on the Vet, and they run all the way to the back, and it's fine. So it would have been fine for this scenario, but the water pump already had a dash 20 on it, and the main reason we're even converting this to AN is because the water pump already had AN fittings on it, and we had leftover lines from the Vet. So I just went ahead and welded a dash 20 on it. It'll work all just the same for our purposes and what we're doing with this car. So we got that all welded up, and then it's time to assemble. We got to basically plug up our ports and get our fan shroud mounted officially, not just test fitted. And then we'll have a cooling package that's ready to go back in the car. So overall, pretty simple project, but definitely satisfying. Felt pretty good to break out the old Fronius TIG welder again. All right, cooling package is complete. Our AN fittings are fully welded on. We are gonna need to pressure test this thing just because I don't fully trust my welds back here. It got a little tight, got a little tricky, a lot of stick out. You normally don't wanna run a lot of stick out when you're welding aluminum because you run a small cup. So you don't have a ton of gas coverage, and you don't want a ton of gas coverage because the more gas coverage you have, the more the heat spreads. So it's not ideal to run a lot of stick out and weird torch angle, but you know, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. So we will check that before we fill it with water and waste a bunch of water, but it's all done. Shroud is mounted, ports are blocked off, fittings are welded on. We are ready to roll. Now, another cool thing is we're gonna be able to use these connectors. So I didn't find out about these until I was building the Vet. I've always used this like RC battery connector on fans because they draw a lot of current. It's the only one I could find that would handle the current, but these do. Fortunately, I have enough extras left over from the Vet build to put these on the Miata as well. Josue's gonna work on getting the radiator tossed back in and making our lines. I'm a little concerned just because it's a very short run for both lines, so it's gonna be kind of tough to get the angles right. Hopefully it all pans out. If anyone can do it, Josue can do it. He's the AN line master. At this point, he built just about every AN line on this car. So he's gonna work on that, and I'm gonna get started on our diff subframe rebuild. We got a good bit of work to do here. So you know the deal. Enough jibber jabber, back to work. I'll probably help Josue get the radiator fitted in, and then I'll dive into my project. So Josue and I went in and grabbed the fresh radiator. We're going to be reusing the old mount that I made. It's a little bent up and a little beat up, but it should still work and serve the purpose. Now, we did notice that the radiator is not as snug as the old one, so we're going to have to address that. We're going to have to do something for mounting it at the top. So with that done, we got the subframe up on the bench, and I went ahead and got to work on repairing this. Now, my plan is to basically replace the piece that the diff bolts into. Now, this is kind of a tall order because when you're cutting something out and you're replacing it with something, everything has to be so much more precise. The holes have to be perfect. The cut has to be perfect. This isn't going to be easy. This is going to be really challenging. So I took a piece of 1/4-inch plate that was actually already around the size I needed. Since I'm going to cut the shape that it goes in, we're just going to leave it as is. We got our holes drilled in it, and we started getting it cleaned up on the belt grinder so it should weld nicely. And then I need to hammer flat the subframe surface to see what we're working with. All right, well, our plan to convert this to AN has been a little foiled. I guess I should have checked it before I welded the fittings on. I thought about it, but I was being lazy. This is why you always test fit when you're fabricating something. Tack, test fit, tack, test fit. As much as it sucks to test fit something 36 times, it's worth it, because then you weld it, then it's way more work to deal with. So yeah, basically the 20 AN line is huge. It's too big and bulky to get from A to B without doing this crazy loop, which is silly. But worse than that one even, the 16 should be boom boom. Instead, it would have to go all the way out here, loop around, and come all the way back and 90 in. Moral of the story is, we're gonna see if the regular thermostat housing will bolt up here. If it will, then all we gotta do is cut this off, cut this off, cut that off, and then we can use regular rubber hoses. So Josue's already grabbed the thermostat housing off here. So we're gonna try that out. Place your bets. Will it work? Will it not work? Just depends on how that's designed to seal, you know? If that's got like its own O-ring type or... Oh, what the hell is that? Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, see? All right, we're good. We're good. Yeah, literally. I just didn't cut the center out of mine. We are good. Let's roll. So once we confirmed that the thermostat housing was going to fit, it was time to start chopping everything up. So the first is this water neck that threads into the water pump. It's got an AN fitting on it. It's too long. It's not going to work. So we need to get that cut down. And then we need to cut the AN fittings off that I just welded on the radiator. This is a little painful because the radiator ends were nice and bead rolled, and now I've got to chop them off and left this kind of ugly weld as my bead to hold the hose on. But hey, it is what it is. You make mistakes. Sometimes you don't check things that you should check, and comes back to bite you. So I need to weld a little extension on here for the rubber hose. Luckily, I had this perfect size piece lying around, so I threw a bead roll on the end of it, got it cleaned up, and went ahead and welded it to the fitting. So now we'll have a thread-in fitting to the water pump, but for our rubber hose, which in hindsight, this is what I should have done from the beginning, but I was excited about the idea of putting AN radiator hoses on the Miata just for the fun of it. So now that we've abandoned that plan, things are going a little more smoothly. So I went ahead and helped Josue get the radiator back in so he can start working on hooking up the regular simple rubber hoses. And then I got back to my project, fixing this subframe. I've been dreading this. I know it's going to be a pain. I went ahead and welded the nuts to the 1/4-inch plate and started working on a plan on how to remove the bent plate. The problem is it's two pieces. It's the top piece, and then the nuts are welded to a piece below that. So it's two separate pieces we would need to cut out. So I decided to try an alternative plan. We're gonna heat everything up and then try to bend it back straight. And by some miracle, it worked, and it seems a little sketchy, but what we're gonna do to kind of mitigate that risk is we're gonna drill a bunch of holes around the nuts. And we're basically gonna weld the top plate to the bottom plate in the center where the nuts are. Now that's gonna make sure everything's good and attached and add some structure there. If it's just welded on the ends, then that's part of why it could flex and it's not utilizing that second piece of steel. So with that done, hopefully it works. Hopefully it holds. It's one of those things without rebuilding the subframe, it's the best way to do it. So we're just gonna carry on and hope for the best on that front. So with that done and dusted, all we need to do now is weld up a new mount for the rear end. So not only did the subframe get bent, but the mount that attaches the diff to the subframe got bent. So I got a new unwelded one from Monster Miata. I figured I'd just weld it myself for fun. And we got that welded up, and now we're pretty well done figuring out stuff for the rear end. So now it's time to wire up these connectors and make sure that these fans are gonna work. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if the fans work. They definitely don't pull as much air as the old race fans did. All right, let's always working on these front plates. Making these brackets here to hold the radiator forward at the top here. So what we're gonna do is drill through these and rivet them to the radiator itself. So there's no tubes or anything in here. We've got a bit of space. So we'll rivet them there and then we can take them off if we need to. And that should secure that. Got my connectors on, pretty happy about that. I like doing wiring. I don't like doing wiring when there was already wiring. You know, like I'd love to rewire this car, that would be fun, but fixing wiring kind of sucks. But we got it done, you know? So yeah, now I need to determine how I want to wire the electric water pump. I want to do it in a way where I can turn the fans and the water pump on with the car off. And the reason is, when you run the water pump and the fans and the engine's not running, it cools down insanely quick. We have it set up that way on this car since it has an electric water pump, and it'll literally drop about a degree a second. So I can go from 210 to 170 in about 40 seconds, which is absolutely absurd. And it's a huge, huge help when it's hot out and you're doing run after run to keep things from getting heat soaked. So that's one of the big reasons I wanted to do the electric water pump. I just got to determine how I want to wire it since I'm out of PVDM outputs, and I can't do it off the fans because they don't come on till 170, 180. I guess that wouldn't really be a problem. I don't know. I'll figure it out. This way he's working on finishing up his brackets here. Those look good, dude. I would have overshot the bend and then just been like, it works.
Boom.
Mint. Now we just gotta do the scary part. Just drilling through them. I'm trying not to drill into the radiator. You know, no big deal. All right, we got really lucky here. So I did wire the nitrous solenoid to a high current output, which is high current enough to handle the load from the water pump. We've already got an input from the ECU, so basically I'm just gonna go from using that output from the ECU input to the PDM to turn on the water pump instead. And I can use one button to turn both on. So the way we're gonna do this, so the water pump only comes on when the engine is running, is we're gonna do it for when the RPM is over 400. No secondary deactivation. Now we go back to our pin map, all right, in theory that should work. So now we just need to wire it to the plug that goes to the nitrous solenoid, which fortunately is right next to the water pump. How convenient. All right, we did it, Josue. The radiator is in and mounted. Came out really good. Wiring's done, water pump works. As far as we can tell, it turns on. We are good. We mostly accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. Mainly the side quest as opposed to the main project, but hey, electric water pump in, wired. Hoses hooked up, welded, then unwelded, then re-welded. We got new lines going to our expansion tank here because this uses AN fittings. I guess in hindsight, I should have just got bars because these were incredibly difficult because they are so short. These two just literally butt up to each other, but hey, we got it done. It's in there. Boom. Josue's radiator mounts. Nice. Radiator's good and solid. Sick. Something I wanted to do for a long time. Worked out really well that we could use the nitrous solenoid power wires. I will need to, I don't know, I might take this off just to get it out of the way. We'll see. See any reason why this car would need the nitrous unless we go compete with it, which if we have to compete with this car in a pinch, then we'll just set it back up. It's not a big deal. So yeah, what do you think, Josue? Feel productive?
Feels good.
Good first project back after Drift Week?
Yes. Now get the Subframe back on.
Yeah, that was, you know, we were supposed to do, that was our main mission here was the subframe. And we got it like half done. We were waiting on paint to dry. It's not our fault.
That is true.
You know, it's one of those things. We're waiting on paint to dry. So anyway, I'm jibber jabbering. I wanted to get all this done in this episode, but there was a lot more damage and a lot more work that needed to be done than I expected, which is generally how it goes with cars, but you remain optimistic. So anyway, that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and end it here, but I hope to see you guys next time. We'll get this thing wrapped up, test it out, see how it works. We got some work to do to the vet, and then ideally we'll have parts for the Monte Carlo. There's a lot. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I sure hope to see you next time. Goodbye.